Hi, welcome to this latest episode of the Wellbeing Show. I'm joined by a guy called Chris Britton. He's an author and HR professional who's been writing about and involved in the field of men and men's health and men's mental health in particular. So very excited to have him on this morning. And we'll be chatting about his story and now he's free of the shackles of his daughter who's off in nursery at the moment. So he's got a bit of time to get on with being an adult, but not for long, I don't imagine. So
Not wrong.
not for long. Back to the real job soon.
Absolutely right. What even is an adult anyway? Don't know.
So you give that up once you have a baby, right?
Absolutely.
So, as always, for folk to know, this is pre-recorded, and it goes out as though it's live. We record it as though it's live. But do message if you have any questions. You can get me on WhatsApp 07506 319 745 +44. Drop the zero if you're outside the UK. Um, don't call me because it's pre-recorded and I'll probably be doing something else and might be a bit old and a bit grumpy with you if you interrupt my life. So send me messages, and I'm sure Chris has got some contact details if you want to get hold of him, but we'll drop those in at the end of the show. That's enough of that from me. So welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk to you. I think this is a topic you're particularly passionate about as well. So, it should
Yeah.
be a good conversation.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I when I started my career after I'd qualified, which was quite a while back, I was up in Edinburgh, and one of the first jobs I got actually was working with new fathers. And there was a big question at that point. Why are men not going to family services,
Mm.
creches and all that sort of stuff? And the answer came back, well, although it might say family and child, it's actually mum and child. That's the issue. And blokes are just, you're nodding away because it hasn't changed that much, really, has it, to be honest?
Yeah, I think it's trying to change, isn't it? There's lots of more conversations about the fairness of dads and dads being more wanting to be more actively involved, which certainly wasn't the case to your point years ago. But thankfully, there's a conversation at least being had about it, which is positive.
Yeah, I mean, and there's lots of organizations, Dad La Soul, etc., who are
Yeah.
just doing brilliant jobs now. It needed a grassroots movement that was separate and different to the sort of Fathers for Justice nonsense, which is nonsense, and I don't subscribe to at all.
Yeah.
Um, but it's been a slow burn, this one, about sort of guys getting involved. And also, we do have structural inequalities in society. So it's still the case, for example, that although most households in the UK are double income, the guy's income is more
Yeah.
and the families rely on it more. That's again changing, but it's slow to change that one. So we are beginning to see the emergence of guys who have chosen to be house husbands and
Yeah.
because the family can afford it.
Yeah, and absolutely, and I guess some of the changes in what it means to be a man
Yeah.
um, have allowed that type of thing to feel less embarrassing, I
Yeah.
suppose. Might have been a historic view of a guy who's a house husband or something like that. It's
Yeah.
like that's a woman's job, or some ridiculous rhetoric like that.
Yeah.
And right, that's changing. But what's really interesting about all of the things you just described, there's no silver bullet to
No,
change it. Like there's a
no,
lot of
not at
things
all.
that need to evolve at the same time, right?
Right. It's a shift
Yeah.
that's gradually happening, but at the same time, there's counterculture stuff, and we're going to talk about maybe some of that as well. But there's
Yeah,
some very dark stuff happening around male violence towards women and girls, for example,
absolutely.
which is really, really horrific stuff. Much worse than when I was growing up, I think, definitely.
Completely.
And I was just on LBC the other night talking about the new money that the government's announced for working with perpetrators of
Yeah.
domestic violence and putting the onus on that, stopping the perpetrator, which I again, I'm a great advocate of. Sort of I have a background in forensic work, working with offenders as a therapist, and they were always men. That's the truth.
Yeah, one of
That's the fact.
my side hustles, if you like, is I'm a volunteer police officer.
Right.
So
Oh, you know the story. Yeah.
yeah, I worked down in Brighton and I've been doing that for the last 11 years or so. And you're right. I mean, on a single shift, you'd go to three or four domestic incidents, and I'd count on my hand the amount of times it's female on male. It's vastly male on female. Not to say that female on male doesn't happen. It probably does happen. That's much less reported. But definitely the male seems to be the perpetrator on the female,
Yeah.
much, much more often.
And it's also the severity of the perpetration.
Yeah.
So even when you may find the odd woman who is responsible, the amount of damage and carnage she's causing is much less what the
Yeah.
guy's doing, always. Men are just far more dangerous. That's the
Yeah.
truth. I mean,
More
I grew up, and we'll talk about your growing up in a second, but
so.
I grew up being taught that very explicitly by in male culture to understand just how dangerous males are, and not in a negative way, but in a realistic way. So, my brother and I, when we hit puberty, we very much got taught about the growth of our muscles and how much damage we could cause. And I was sent to martial arts classes, and so was my brother, so that we would learn to manage our aggression and learn to understand the amount of damage we could cause. And very much brought up in a culture of you never hit a woman. I mean, that may seem like a sexist statement, but it was a fact. That's what I was brought up with. And it was recognizing the difference, right? That the amount of damage and physical damage and hurt that you can cause. And I'm not quite sure that view is out there at the moment.
Mm.
I think that may have shifted. And thinking about those changes, I grew up in school in the 70s and the first wave of current second, what they call second wave feminism, when roles were being challenged. And actually, to my memory, as a guy, I welcomed it. And there was no sense in which I felt the world was shutting down in the way that a lot of men seem to now. I actually felt my world was opening up, to be honest.
Yeah. And
I was
that's
being given more
perspective.
choices about what
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah, and that's just good perspective, isn't it? That's a good level of self-awareness, a good keen eye for opportunity, like you say,
Yeah,
which some people are so blinkered or so disenfranchised with whatever they see in the media or whatever else is going on, or their upbringing, that they don't look outside of their four walls of their own life
yeah.
and see these things for a more
But
holistic
tell me
view.
about your growing up. Where did you grow up? And what
Well,
was
you
it
might
like?
detect, yeah, you might detect a bit of an accent. So I'm from Northern Ireland,
Yeah.
and so I grew up just outside of Belfast,
Okay.
all the way until I was 18. So I left Northern Ireland when I was 18 to come over to Brighton for university, which is where I am now. Um, but I don't know any whether yourself or any of your listeners know much about Northern Ireland, but it's a very
Well, I'm
small.
from an Irish background, so my
Ah,
folks
nice.
are from Southern Ireland, and we're leaving, I suppose, some of those troubles, trying to leave the troubles behind and stuff like that. But
Yeah, well,
please
I
tell us
grew up
about
in
your experience.
Well, I grew up in the Troubles. So,
Yeah.
my dad had one of the jobs that you don't want to have during the Troubles, other than police officer. He was a prison officer.
Ah,
And so, with that came a lot of drama, shall we say, particularly as a young man.
it was a dangerous job to have, very
Yeah, it was. We
targeted, and the whole family would have been targeted as well.
100%. So we had to move house several times. We had cameras. We had a little device
Let's
to look under
talk
the.
about that a little bit. I think it's really important for people to understand
Yeah,
that, um, I mean, police, even today, police and prison officers, not so much prison officers, but police would be a little bit cagey about their background in public. They might call themselves civil servants,
yeah.
just
Sure.
simply because they don't want people to take the mick. That's in mainland UK. In Northern Ireland, though, during those times, if you acknowledge that you were part of these systems, you'd be targeted for assassination.
Yeah, 100%. I
That's the truth,
remember.
right?
Yeah, I remember as a time there was some leak or one of these things where someone had left a laptop on a train type situations, and all the prison officer and police officers' names and addresses were put into the wrong hands.
Oh, God.
That was the first time I remember we had to move house.
Yeah,
So the prison service bought the house from us to allow us to move because the risk was so great to the family. We could have stayed and we could have got bulletproof glass and all that sort of stuff, but
yeah.
that's not what you want to do, is it? I was a teenage boy at the time, and my parents were rightly terrified. And but what was really interesting about it, from my perspective as a teenage boy, all the way up until I think I was about 12 or 13, my dad lied to me and my sister about his job for our
Okay.
protection. So all the way up until that sort of age, I was under the impression he worked as some phone engineer or something for BT, I think was the story. And that was the decision they made to protect us from the nonsense, I suppose, that goes on in the real world. But then once I found out, that kind of started me on a bit of an interesting tract in life because it started a bit of a distrust and a wariness of people around me because all of a sudden
Right.
I didn't feel like I could be honest with my friends. Oh, what's your dad do? What's your mum do? Those types of questions you get with friends. I didn't feel like I could be honest. And it's only in the last sort of 10 years or so when we're way out of it and all in different countries and all that sort of stuff. I've started talking about it more openly. But certainly at the time, I was very, as a teenage boy, trying to forge my own relationships with my own friends and my own way in the world. It definitely shaped who I became as a young adult for
You
sure.
were effectively, as a family, what people might understand as witness protection. You weren't witnesses, but that's the system,
Same
right?
sort of idea. Yeah, exactly.
Moving, changing identity, being cautious about who you say. And I say that because my service has done and currently works with people going through that system from the other side, honor killings and all those types of things. So you know about those
Yeah,
and you know about witness protection and how it works. And it's very serious. And again, the stuff about domestic abuse and women and children having to hide from stalkers and predators, etc. So there's
exactly.
resonances there, aren't there, in terms of
100%. And I think it just has a real knock-on impact
yeah,
for how you view the world. And I guess when you're in it at the time, for any of these types of things, it feels very chaotic. It feels very never-ending. But inevitably, it ends at some point, as in you are able to move forward in one way or another. But actually, when you start thinking hindsight-wise and looking back and thinking about who you are as a person now and how that has shaped your view on the world, your view
yes.
on relationships, your view on society as a whole, you don't think about it at the time, but it definitely has a lasting impact way outside the reaches of in the moment for sure.
And in thinking about, because my experience with like my Irish heritage, I don't really think of myself as British, UK or Irish, I don't know. It's your decision to tell me.
Yeah,
Um, but I think of myself as having an Irish heritage. I feel British. I've got both passports since Brexit
yeah, makes
because
life much easier. Of
because it shortens the queue.
course.
I'm not into queues, mate, at all.
Yeah,
But I remember because my family were on the Republican side, and actually, well, my grandfather was heavily involved in Dublin in the armed
sure.
Republican side, very much so, um, and quite a dangerous man. I'm glad I didn't know him all that much, to be honest. So
Fair.
I met him a few times, and he was really unpleasant,
Yeah,
to say the least. But the that intercommunal violence, that paramilitary stuff, the danger led to, when I look back on it, a very narrow set of identity rules,
yeah,
as,
100%.
as well as the communal stuff and the secrecy and all that. But what it was to be a guy, what it was to be a woman was very prescribed. Anything that signaled stepping out of that was seen as a danger signal in my memory. Was that similar for you?
Very similar. So I grew up technically on the Protestant side of the community,
Sure.
but my parents were very much of the mindset of it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter to them, and it shouldn't matter to me. And so if you were to ask me to describe, am I Irish, am I British, am I whatever, I would say British as a default.
Yeah.
But if someone said I was Irish, am I offended? Absolutely not.
Right.
And if, but equally, I say about my parents being a little bit more open. If you were to describe my mum as Irish, she might take offense to that
Yeah.
slightly because
Yeah.
generation, it's a different generation. But the whole Protestant Catholic thing that was never the thought. My wife is Catholic. The thought of a Protestant and a Catholic being together in a relationship when
Yeah.
I grew up was very much, oh, you can't do that. Like you can't mix with that side of the community. And there's certain streets you would go down in Belfast or whatever where you see the flags in the building and that would tell you what community you're walking into. And if you happen to be wearing a particular team's football shirt or a particular color on your hat or something like that, then you either become friend or potential foe.
Yeah.
Like when you say it, like when you talk about it now and you think about it, you think it's like it's ludicrous behavior. But in the time, and it's possibly still there, but maybe to a lesser degree, but certainly at the time, that was ferocious belief that those parts of the communities and those people in those communities had, and it bled through to all
Yeah.
parts of society within Northern Ireland. I've thankfully escaped from it, and I
Yeah.
thankfully had a much more welcoming view of humanity, all in all. But that wasn't the case for everyone, for sure.
And in terms of being a young man specifically around this fear and distress, sort of when you reflect upon it, how did that shape your thinking about being a guy, for example?
Well, I guess it's one of those things I think a lot of young men fall into the trap of doing. You feel like you need to be strong.
Yeah.
I certainly felt I did. I needed to be unflustered. I needed to be stoic. I needed to make sure that I didn't show weakness. And because that's what my dad and his dad and all the other male role models as I was growing up kind of instilled in you. It's this is what a guy does. This is what a girl does. And actually, if you are feeling a certain type of fear, don't show it because that's fear is weakness. And if
Yeah.
you're feeling emotional, don't show it because emotion is weakness. And that was my perspective on the world growing up, certainly until I hit early adulthood, when I guess I started being a little bit more comfortable in my own skin, and I'm trying to understand what it meant to me personally to be a man. But I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of older men who are probably still thinking about that, but actually, particularly younger men now, still struggling with their identity and their place in the world.
Yeah, well, emotional intelligence is a new term. And I mean, it's not so men have not had and don't have and have that sort of sense of understanding their internal world. But certainly I resonate with the idea, particularly from a community and cultural background that was traumatized, for example, that the idea of stoic, not showing anything, showing feelings, for example, would be vulnerability that would be abused and used and etc. And also, I guess you had that additional thing of having to, for your own safety, hide your identity as well. So that reinforced that notion with
Yeah,
you.
exactly that. And as I said, that shapes your ability to make deep and meaningful relationships. And even all the way up until I met my now wife, getting into like close relationships was always a real struggle for me. And I was always told I was very guarded and very difficult to read,
Yeah,
very, I don't show my emotion very much. And that was all in my head thinking, really? I think I'm very open. I think I'm very
sure.
willing to share how I'm feeling. But when you hear it from all different angles, from lots of different people, then you kind of think, oh, maybe there is something there then. And you try and work it out. You try and trace it back to where that's come from. And for me, definitely it was my upbringing that kind of
Right.
brought those walls up around me.
And did you have siblings? Do you have siblings as well?
Yeah, I've got a sister, so she lives in London now. Like most families who have drama within their families, we've fallen out. We don't speak to each other, and we haven't
Sure.
done in a long time. But
Sure.
yeah, got a sibling, and when she was able to leave Northern Ireland, she left a little bit earlier than I did to go and live in London, where she still is. She got out. She wanted to leave that kind of
Sure.
notion of trouble and unsafety at the same time.
And my family were a classic sort of family affected by trauma and historical trauma. So there was a lot of drunkenness, there was alcoholism, there was violence, and there was uncertainty in the family as well. Was that a similar story for you as
Yeah, nailed it. So
yeah,
my mum is an alcoholic and still is, and a lot of that is blamed on, from her perspective, a lot of that is blamed on her fear of my dad's job and what he did and all the things that went with that. Never been able to feel like she could open up, so she turned, actually like a lot of men do, she turned to negative coping to help her deal with that, and that's a lifelong illness and something she's not been able to shake.
right?
And my dad now, I mean, like I say, they live in a different country now, so they're well away from it. But he's got PTSD.
Yeah.
He might never call it that, or he'd kind of shoot you down to say no, definitely I don't. But he has all the hallmarks of PTSD, and that affects their relationship. It affects the family dynamics, and it
I
just
want to talk about this a little bit because I've got some colleagues and friends who are prison officers, and they also have PTSD. And I
yeah
don't think people realize what prison officers have to deal with. And it's not just in your context or your father's context that he was afraid of being killed, which would give you PTSD, but actually what you have to witness as as a prison officer on a daily basis is pretty horrific.
yeah
Because prisons are pretty horrific, and people just don't realize just how bad they are. And again, this is a sort of male culture thing as well, because prisons are 98% men.
yeah
That's the truth,
yeah
right? and they're full of very dysfunctional men who are very damaged. You have these sort of movies, don't you, on in sort of about the shot caller and all this sort of stuff, but that's not what happens. You've got broken, damaged men in these institutions, both guarding them and imprisoned. I mean, that's the truth here.
Yeah.
And so my friends have had to do things like, absolutely horrific things happen when men have literally ripped themselves apart in their cell overnight because they can't cope,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And your father would have been exposed to that stuff as well. And somehow, although he would have protected you, but it would have been there in the relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, massively so. And when you layer things on top, such as, men of particularly that generation, don't talk about how they're feeling or how it's impacted them, it kind of eats them from the inside.
Yeah.
Because, I kind of I can't speak firsthand from a prison officer's experience. I can hear the stories of, from my dad and other men, but certainly from a police officer's perspective, similar.
Yes, of course.
You kind of go
Absolutely.
to
As a
these
first
horrific,
responder.
yeah, these horrific things with people at the very worst point of their lives, and then you do some paperwork, and then you go home and you have dinner and you watch TV and you chat to your friends or your wives, and then you get up and you do it all again, and it just goes on this cycle, and unchecked. We are better at talking about it now, but there's still a long way to go there for sure, particularly on the male side. But unchecked, you can easily see why that would scramble someone's brain just seeing this level of trauma over and over and over again, and
Yeah.
just that constant adrenaline that is coursing through your body about everything you do. In the police, we've got some level of protection in terms of vests and our equipment, and usually fairly other police officers within a reasonable close distance to come and help us if it all kicks off. But in a prison, I mean, my understanding is prison officers don't
They're
have.
not walking around in armed gear. No, they're
No,
not.
they don't have pepper spray. They don't have whatever, all that sort of stuff. Plus, where do they go? As a police officer, you can, if you're in rail danger, you can take cover and run away. But I suppose if you're in prison, you're kind of trapped within the confines of those walls, aren't you?
But also, thinking about your father's context and your context growing up, the secrecy as well, because, to talk about it would have been to put a target on you for assassination,
Yeah,
etc.
absolutely.
And so very dangerous. That reinforced that very negative thing in men about not talking about what they
Yeah,
see. Now,
exactly.
we should say, and I'll say this as a clinical statement of fact, that all first responders, and let's include prison service in this, are at high risk of developing PTSD. We know that now as a fact. The London Fire Brigade is finally beginning to acknowledge this. For years, they've denied the truth of it, and not given, and firefighters in particular have this very unfortunate male patriarchal culture of stoicism, and have significant problems. The police used to, but I think maybe the culture's changing in the police services around the UK now about understanding. I mean, you talked about the idea that you've got protective vests, but nothing's protecting your mind.
Yeah, exactly that. Well,
There isn't a bulletproof vest for the brain, right?
no, you're absolutely spot on. There definitely isn't. And I think I read somewhere like an average emergency responder. So if I use the police as the example here, experience something like 700 odd traumatic events
Yeah.
in their lifetime versus the average person on the street, which might experience 4 or 5. So that's the kind of scale we're talking about in terms of
And
what
we're
the
effectively talking about you're in the trenches, literally, like World War One. You're on the front line. It's the same as a soldier on the front line, right?
Yeah, but what's really, I think, really interesting about, and again, just speaking from police experience here, I look around the police force now. You've got all these government initiatives to recruit X thousands of
Yeah.
more officers and that sort of stuff. And whether it's me getting older, I don't know. That could be some of it. But I look around some of the officers now who are 18, 19, 20 years old, coming in and being chucked out on the front line with little to no life experience, and little to no support in terms of dealing with this stuff afterwards, unless you're very fortunate to work or have a strong unit around you in terms of family, friends, and actually the police forces themselves. And I can't fault, I work in Sussex Police, and I can't fault the support they've given me over the years. It's been very gratefully received and very well organised. But if you if you don't have that element of life experience or the ability to compartmentalize, or at least somewhere that you can offload, to your point, your
Sure.
mind and what you're thinking about things, it swallows you up, and it
Yeah.
swallows you up before you
Yeah.
even know it. And that's the problem. It kind of eats you away before you even realize it's happened.
So the interesting thing about all of this is the odds are against you being a guy that has emotional insight.
Yeah.
Right? They're absolutely against you. So how on earth did that happen? Where did that come from in your story? So Prince William, for example, I remember hearing him talk about for him, he was confronted with it after his first child. He was like, I can't hide from this anymore. And I'm definitely not giving my kid this stuff that I've got. And he was like really clear about it at the conference. I thought, well done, mate. What was it for you that you went, nah, this is wrong?
Yeah. So, well, where I kind of got to where I am now, which is talking about this stuff much more openly, for me personally, it was about when I was kind of getting into my late 20s and 30s. I was thinking I didn't have a partner at the time because I didn't feel like I could hold a relationship. I
Yeah.
really didn't feel
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it.
yeah. No, I get that. I really understand it.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I kind of
definitely.
I made the decision like one of two things is going to happen: either deal with my own issues that I clearly have
Yeah.
got, or I grow old alone.
Yeah.
And the grow old alone thing didn't feel like a viable alternative, so I decided to give it another go. And my now wife convinced me to go to counseling early on in our relationship,
Okay, right.
which definitely helped me with my own level of self-awareness for sure. But then where I am now talking about this stuff more professionally, it was last year, beginning of last year, my wife and I suffered two back-to-back miscarriages.
Oh, I'm
Um,
so sorry, mate.
yeah, but as a guy, I found myself deeply frustrated that I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't
Oh,
feel something in that space particularly, which I think historically has been seen as a thing that impacts the mum and the women, because after all, it's physically happening to her. And I just didn't feel like I could express myself. I
sure.
didn't know how, nor did I feel I had the space to do it,
Yeah.
nor actually did I feel I had the right to do it.
Yeah, no, I get that. I remember
Yeah.
my first experience with an ex-girlfriend of that and just bursting into tears and then apologizing because I thought I was taking up space that didn't belong to me.
Exactly that. Well, I decided one of two things is going to happen. Either I will let that eat me up and drive
Yeah.
me mad, or I need to get it out. I need to get this out of my head and make me feel a bit lighter in terms of my feelings about it. And that started with me writing, and it started with me
Oh,
podcasting.
really? Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like a cathartic journaling
Sure.
exercise at the start, which really helped me stop the swirling thoughts and kind of get it out of my own system.
I'm just going to take a moment to encourage people to listen to that because narrative, this writing stuff is a form of therapy. It's like literally prescribed.
It's
Um,
huge. Yeah.
Yeah, we are sort of literate animals, and I'm not going to really go into the complexities of what that is, but we are literate animals, and writing is a really important process for us about managing stuff. So, was there a history of writing in your family? What was it that you chose that form?
No history of writing in my family. I actually think it goes back to potentially my views of what it meant to be a man. I felt almost safer writing it than saying it. It
Okay,
felt less judgmental to me rather than having a conversation with someone, anyone. It felt just like a safe space between me and the pages that
no, I
I could
guess it.
say what
So
I
it's a
wanted to say.
projective device. You can get some
Exactly.
emotional distance, look at it and think about it and
Correct.
process it. So you're
Exactly.
using the frontal lobes and all that.
Yeah, and that really helped me. And it's one of
Yeah.
those things I talk about a lot now is positive coping and journaling being one of those things. It absolutely works. But then that just started me down a rabbit hole, really. It started me down a rabbit hole of
Right.
I started talking about fatherhood. That's where I first started digging into it and my experience. And I looked at hindsight about how I felt when my daughter was born and self-diagnosed, really. But I had a really tough time in the first couple of months after her being born. I kind
Okay.
of liken it to a little bit of grief in terms of grieving for a life
Okay.
that I thought I'd lost and wasn't what the movies portray fatherhood is. Certainly not my experience.
So
And
you
that
didn't feel that immediate attachment bonding. You just like it was quite shocking.
I didn't feel anything. So that was the
That's
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite frightening when that happens.
Yeah, that was my distinct when my daughter was born. That was my distinct memory of that moment, amongst all the chaos and the noise and the blood and everything else that goes alongside it. By the way, there's nothing glamorous about being in a
No,
birth.
it's frightening.
It's terrible in
It's
every
like you're
way.
watching somebody you love die, and
Yeah,
that's what you think. It's
yeah,
like
exactly
really
that. Yeah, yeah,
scary stuff.
100%, exactly that.
Yeah,
But when she came out, I remember thinking I should feel this instant, because
that's
you
right.
see, that's what the movies tell you, that you get this
Yeah.
flood of love and emotion. I remember just looking at her going, I feel empty, I feel nothing. And that carried on for a prolonged, few weeks, few months period of time, and then
It's
it
the
gradually
thing.
started to
And of
change.
course, the midwife isn't coming to you and checking on your feelings.
Yeah, no,
You
exactly that.
definitely will be checking with mum, and a lot of mums have this. And I just want to say to mums, new mums, if you feel numbed out, that's totally normal. Don't pathologize it. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It'll change eventually over time. But it is quite a shocking event giving birth, mum.
Yeah, of
So
course it is.
give
Yeah.
yourself a break.
But it's all the things that we don't talk about. I think a lot of people go into these things thinking, particularly from a dad's angle, that, yeah, you got to get through the trauma of the birth itself, but then it's all love and it's all roses and you've got your family unit and that sort of stuff. And the reality is, no one ever told me anyway. Like people say to you, you'll be a bit tired, you'll have to
Bit
juggle
tired.
different workloads, you'll have to do do the bins more often or whatever. But no one ever tells you how it feels or doesn't feel, in my case, inside. But one of the things that actually really
But
helped,
let's just think about that for a bit, because I think it is really interesting, this notion of loss. One of the things that a lot of guys have told me who become fathers is they lose their loved one, their partner,
yeah,
because they become the primary carer. So that mother bond unit suddenly emerges almost from nowhere. You've been allowed into it during the pregnancy, but after birth, you just don't exist,
yeah, pretty
right?
much.
And that is quite distressing for a lot of men. They just don't, they've not been given the models to understand that, right?
Yeah. And I think, look, a lot of guys like to be pragmatic, myself included, and want to try and fix and want to try and be helpful. But certainly in the early weeks of fatherhood, there's little to nothing that you can do, certainly for the baby, because they only want one thing, and that
That's
usually
it.
comes
That's
from
right.
mum, right? But then you're right, you've got mum, in my wife's case, wasn't a traumatic birth necessarily by, some people's standards, but she had recovery time where she wasn't able to do stuff. So I could see her in pain and discomfort and wanting to sleep and rest and all that sort of stuff. I didn't feel like I could fix it, couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Actually, what that left me feeling really, and this is all in hindsight and self-awareness, is I felt like I just wasn't very good at it. I wasn't, all of a
Yeah.
sudden, I wasn't very good at being a dad. I wasn't very good at being a husband. And actually, that then bleeds into work because I had to go back to work after just a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
but you're tired. So I didn't feel like I was very good at work either at that point. So all of a sudden, you go from this really excited about being a new dad to actually I'm just terrible at everything now, and that's not great. And it passes, of course, it passes. But certainly in that moment in time, it feels like it's never going to end.
But it's
So
another form of postpartum depression that isn't often talked about. So
no, exactly, not in
loss
guys.
of identity, loss of meaning, loss of purpose,
Yeah.
sense of being a burden and useless and all that sort of stuff.
Correct. All that sort of stuff. But one thing that really helped, my wife and I, and this came about as like a 3 a.m. conversation in the early weeks where, everyone's a bit frayed and everyone's snapping at each other. We just agreed to disagree in terms of what the mum is experiencing and what the dad is experiencing are just different.
Yeah.
It's not a competition. It's not you're tired, you're more tired than I am, or I'm working harder than you are. And that's an easy conversation and a tit for tat argument to get into, by the way. It's just a different experience. And as much as you can try and empathize from the other side's perspective, you'll never truly understand it.
Yeah.
Unless you can listen and you can be non-judgmental and all that sort of good stuff, there just has to be an acceptance that what dad's experience is different to what mum's
Which is
experience.
interesting. The way I would frame it, and we know this from evidence of couples, is you're accepting the role boundaries.
Mm,
And they're ascribed at this point because the baby's making the decisions, not
pretty
you.
much.
That's it. Your decisions got out the window, whatever adult stuff. We were joking about it before the show.
Yeah. No,
You know,
that's
the
right.
baby has needs, it's going to get those needs met. And reasonable people will just adapt themselves to those needs
Yeah,
because that's who you are as a person, right?
correct.
And whatever you imagine is going to happen, you get these roles and you either come to terms with those roles or you don't.
Yeah. And you can easily fight against them. And that's the thing. When you're very tired, it can become a competition for who's feeling the most awful. And one of the
And we
things,
should say, I mean, we're not being heteronormative here. So I've seen people take on these roles in single sex couples, in individual single parents, single parents are really interesting because they have to play both roles,
And
and
yeah, like,
but the
well,
roles exist. They do. That's because the baby demands it. That's
yeah,
why.
and more power to them. Like people who do
I
this,
don't know how they do it.
yeah, single households, like, it's crazy to me how they do it. Like, it's
It's
difficult
like
to,
unreal stuff. It's
yeah,
unreal stuff. I never want to be in that situation myself. But
no.
we should, as a society, recognize that and give people more help. That's the basic point here.
Of course we should. And I think for fatherhood in particular, I remember going to the NCT classes, and I know there's other classes
Oh,
out
yes, yes,
there.
yes, yeah.
With the exception of maybe an hour, and that's not even me exaggerating, like with the exception of an hour, which was about changing the baby, bathing the baby, that sort of stuff, the rest of it was all about mum's experience of birth. And I remember just coming away from it thinking, my wife probably feels much more informed, and I certainly felt more knowledgeable for leading up to becoming a dad. But my God, I feel so unprepared for when the baby's actually here.
Well, it's interesting. NCT is one of the organizations that currently still on its website, if you look at it, they will say, when we work with marginalized groups, one of the marginalized groups they have is dads.
Yeah,
They
100%.
specifically list them as marginalized groups because
Yeah.
the services are still not there. Um, did you know other guys in this situation? Were there other men that you could talk to? I guess not your dad, even though he may have been through it, but were there other men?
Yeah, so certainly not my dad. That's not the type of relationship him and I had or have. Um, I think what's really interesting about that, yeah, short answer is yes. I was able to talk about it, but only when I felt ready to talk about it.
Okay.
And what's quite interesting about it is there's other dads out there. So just in my, it's a small sample of my friendship group who experienced the same things,
Yeah.
but no one ever talked about it. No one ever said
It's
that.
pretty common in my experience. It's pretty common.
Exactly.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
kind of just play this ruse of
yeah,
like everyone knows it, but no one says it
yeah,
type thing. And it would have been really helpful to me if someone had said, just sat down to me and go, look, this might happen and this could have happened. Then you can at least prepare for it the best way you
sure.
can. But that wasn't the case until afterwards, and other people go, "Yeah, I experienced it." So why didn't you tell me before? Why didn't you tell me this might happen before, so I didn't feel alone, or I didn't feel like I was broken,
Yeah,
or I was emotionally dead inside?
yeah.
And yeah, definitely, there's more people to talk about, but I only wish we talked about it before the fact.
So you were beginning to develop these understandings. You're journaling. You're beginning to write about these things. You've done some personal work. You're having these life experiences which are challenging you, and you're adapting to them, and in the way that we all adapt to things, sort
Yeah,
of grudgingly and with great difficulty,
yeah.
because that's because the world is the world, right? Um, but when did you start to think, well, maybe the experiences I'm having need to be shared wider and they should be put into some book or because I literally think anybody who decides to write a book is insane and should be locked up because it's such a difficult task. I have no idea why anybody would choose to do that to themselves, but
Yeah.
you tell me what when did you decide to punish yourself in that way?
Yeah, well, I guess for me, again, it goes back to like a positive coping thing. I started having more I wanted to say on the matter
Sure.
about fatherhood to begin with, but then it kind of expanded into men's health more broadly. And the more I started, again, speaking to my friends about it or people I knew or whatever, all these men were telling me about their stories of body dysmorphia,
Yeah.
addiction struggles,
Yeah.
grief, men's health statistics and purpose and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, this really bothers me that we don't feel that we can talk about this stuff,
Sure.
despite years and years and years of effort from people that you mentioned, Prince William, for example, influencers, so celebrities, whatever, trying to make a difference in this space. But actually, when I started looking in the statistics, all the scary statistics, if you like, suicide rates,
Mhm.
addiction rates, life expectancy, education standards, they're all unfavorable for men and
Yeah.
boys.
Yeah,
And
without a
I'm
doubt.
sort of thinking, I feel like I've got something to say on this matter. I've got a perspective and I want to get it out, and it will help me getting it out of how I'm thinking rather than
Yeah.
just swirling around in my brain about it.
Yeah. And so you then decided to write a book.
I did. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us what that is called and what it's about.
So the book is called Behind the I'm Fine and the Truth About Modern Day Masculinity. So that I'm fine thing for me is that default autopilot response that a lot of men give when asked the question of, are you okay? I'm fine. even if it's not fine, even if it's really, really not fine, it's a default automatic response that we give. And this notion of masculinity, the reason that came into it for me was I've never really considered myself a typical masculine male in terms of, I love musicals, I love nature, I'm terrible at DIY, I like all sorts of music from pop to rock to metal. I've never considered myself that notion of stoic, strong, big man that does all who's aggressive because I'm not in that. I've never crossed my mind at all to think that way. So I sort of think, well, what is going on with masculinity now, and how is that impacting different age groups? So the older men and younger men. And I started digging into this concept of self-worth and identity.
Okay.
And where that really sent me down a bit of a rabbit hole was looking at what's going on with so-called influencers. And I hate using the terms because they're not influencers. They're very irritating people. The Andrew Tates of the world,
Oh,
the
yeah. I mean, they're just really dangerous people to be.
exactly, yeah, exactly that. And I started thinking, why are those people getting so much airtime, and why are young men in particular being drawn into them?
Sure.
And I started thinking, well, there must be a reason for it, right? And one of the reasons, and I talk about this a lot in the book, I think it's an unintended consequence of the equality movement, is we've moved so quickly and all for the right reasons, and we still have a long way to go, as you mentioned earlier, but definitely the right thing, and the world is a much better place for it to bring equality for men and women. But one of the things I think is an unintended consequence of that is we've kind of demolished what millennia views of what it means to be a man are.
Yeah.
Needed to happen, like it always needed to happen, but in just one generation, we've said that's not what a man is anymore. And if you're acting that way as a man, that's wrong. Do this stuff instead. And actually, I think the way it's been marketed has been unhelpful for young men. They don't see themselves in a lot of the narrative that's on the news or in the
Okay.
media. And I think that's causing them to feel, well, what's my place in the world? And there's very dangerous and opportunistic people out there, like these Andrew Tates, who kind of see this gap and they're pulling young men into this side of what it means to be a man, what they think it means to be a man. And it's created this polarized society now. And I used to be able to think, well, Andrew Tate, he's online, so we could just delete our apps and not listen to him, right? But now we've got Donald Trump. We've got the most powerful man in the world
Yeah.
making
Yeah. Who's
decisions
quite a
on
disturbed
policy.
individual. Yeah.
Who's doing this exactly the same thing, but doing it from a place of absolute power, and it's creates fueling this debate of polarization. So what my book really is about is men to continue the equality debate. We need to give men a place in the world, and for men to feel comfortable in their own skin again. And that requires them to build self awareness. It requires them to be the role models that the world needs for them and their friends. It requires them to have spaces where they can talk to men about uniquely male problems without feeling embarrassed or shameful or whatever else it might be. Because the only way I think we can really get rid of these dangerous people and really accelerate the equality movement even further is by having all sides of society lifted up. I don't think we need to push one down to lift one up.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm playing in this space at the moment is how do we do that? How do we help men feel they've got a purpose, a sense of self-worth, and the value they're adding to the world is legacy and it's valuable and it's helping the world be a better place.
Yeah.
And we need
And
to
how would you see that structurally? So we think about things like recently the government just announced, didn't they, the in sex education classes now they're going to include radicalization, they're going to include concepts such as misogyny, etc. We saw announced the other day more work with perpetrators, male perpetrators of violence, and so I'm guessing you're welcoming those things, but you'd like to see something more positive.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, always welcome any government initiative that's aiming to tackle this. We've got the men's health strategy that's under review. We've got
Yeah.
parental leave under review. We've got all these things which are kind of trending in the right direction, which is great.
Yeah.
But I think big systemic policy changes will help. Of course they will. But actually, I think the work needs to be done with the normal guys of the world,
Right.
normal men and, the uncles, the brothers, the dads, the work colleagues who see poor behavior, who have a child, a young man in their life who they can
Yeah.
influence with their own behavior. That's where the real change happens, is that ground up grassroots working out of what it means to be a man in this world.
So
And
supporting those guys that are willing to be, if you like, role models to the younger men, allowing younger men to understand that world is complicated and difficult. They're right, it's complicated and difficult. They're right, paths are not set up, but that's the way the world is.
correct.
And here are the core tools. And what would be for you the core tools that men need if that works for you? I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, 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 no.
I'm not asking you to solve the masculinity
Yeah,
crisis.
well, if I could, I'd be a very rich man, I think.
That's right.
I think
But you've been thinking about this. So
of
what
course.
would be the elements for you?
So I think one of the things that causes a lot of issues for men's mental health in particular is a sense of loneliness or a sense of lack of connection. Because we're all human creatures, we all want to connect in some way or another, right? And actually, when there's a lack of safe space to do that, we seek it somewhere. We're going to find it somewhere. And if there's not a good way to do it, then unfortunately, a lot of guys seek the bad ways to do it, which is where these influencers and whatever else prey on their victims,
Well,
if you
we
like.
saw it when we're doing gang work, to be honest, with the breakdown in families in South London. I was working with gangs,
Yeah,
and we would see young men there who were highly traumatized. And actually, I remember a gang leader once just telling us it's straight. They just want love, and I give it to them, and then
exactly.
they'll carry my drugs for me and make my money
Yeah.
for me. That's
100%. It's as simple as that, right? We'll seek it somewhere. That admiration, that gratitude, that feeling of you feel like you're part of something or someone gives a damn about you. So I think creating more community spaces, male group therapy where it's all men talking
yeah,
about men, sports clubs, running clubs, those types of things where men can, build and forge relationships and talk about their feelings without the feelings being the center point of what they're
yeah.
doing.
No, I mean that is the key to getting men through the door. I think if you label it therapy group, it's forget it.
Doesn't work. Exactly.
It's not going to happen. But if it's
Exactly.
labeled an interest group, if it's like a barbershop, I mean, I had a guy called Graham who runs some high-end barbershops, and he's trained all his staff to look out for men's mental health. And guys are going to barbershops, and these barbers are talking to them about their feelings.
Yeah.
So
It's,
it's like, and
yeah,
they've
because
all
that's
got mental health first aid training. So if they notice one of their customers is upset, they can direct them. So it's that type of thing. It's like looking at the structures that men are using
yeah.
and thinking, well, how do I enhance this so that it's now fitting this new agenda?
Correct. And I think also just an acceptance that there are some things that are uniquely male. There are some things which impact men that
Yeah.
don't impact women. Things like prostate cancers, testicular cancers,
Yeah.
erectile dysfunction, fatherhood, all that sort of stuff. Stuff that perhaps
Yeah.
historically has been a shame topic.
Yeah.
And we need to get better at talking about those things and talking about them in a normal way. So, because those are the things I think that drive to the final outcomes of a lot of these things, which is domestic abuse, suicide,
Yeah.
self-harm, addiction. Those things don't spring up on people, right? They're a symptom of lots of things that have gone before and perhaps lots of missed opportunities to stop it getting to that point. So I think if we kind of play in that preventative space by creating the opportunity for men to feel comfortable in their own skin. I mentioned I talk a lot about self-worth. A call to action for all guys out there is what is the legacy that you want to leave behind on the
Yeah.
world? And that
Yeah. Yeah.
world,
Great.
you don't need to change the world as the 8 billion people in the world, but just your little circle of influence. What's that legacy that you want to be known for and famous for? If you can't answer that question or you're not sure, then that's a chance now for you to stop and reflect about what value you're bringing to your little circle. But your point you raised, Noel, about the barbershop and spotting if something's a bit different. What a simple concept in a group of
That's
mates.
brilliant.
If you see
Genius.
something in your
Really is.
mind, so you haven't heard from them in a while,
Yeah.
shooting them a WhatsApp message might be the thing that saves their life, or might be the thing that makes them feel they've got value or purpose in their life again. That's simple. That doesn't need government policy. That just needs men picking up their phone and dropping a mate a text to check in on them to make sure they're okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think we've just literally run out of time, unfortunately, Chris. Um, so, I mean, what's heartening to me as somebody who's been in this space for over 30 years now is that what was missing 30 plus years ago were men willing to work on the ground floor,
Yeah.
right? And it seems to me that men like you and other men now are beginning to form those ground level sort of peer-led organizations and groups and thoughts, and not challenge what guys like doing because it's like there's one of the groups. it's not Dad Soul, it's another one, and I can't remember them at the moment. They'll come back to me. But they have meetings in pubs, and
Yeah,
they don't drink much, but they turn into very quickly turn into just sharing sessions. And they
exactly.
have a room in a pub. They might have a pint, but it's quickly moves away from the drinking into the talking. And it's been brilliantly successful. There's That's a great classic weight loss group. There's a bloke who went to Weight Watchers and went, oh, they're all women. I don't know. They're talking about stuff I don't understand. It calls it something like "Fat Man Gets Slim" or something. It's a
Okay,
classic
okay.
bloke way of approaching stuff, and basically it's a football club. These types of approaches I find incredibly inspiring.
Yeah,
And just the other day, because I go with a mate and we do some Thai boxing together as part of our fitness, and the instructor, and I'm a classic old bloke who likes to tease and take the piss and all that sort of stuff. That's what I grew up with. I'm careful about it these days because it can be upsetting to people. But we rip the piss out of each other a lot in this thing, and at the instructor, and I was sort of teasing him the other day about being a lady boy and stuff like this, and because he boxed in Thailand, and we're having these jokes, and he told me that the other guy that goes, Dan, who hasn't said it to me, but he says it's so refreshing for him. He can feel like he could just let go, and it's okay. It's a safe space because we all know that we are not going to go and enact violence on people,
yeah,
and we can be really comfortable with each other, really comfortable in our skin. We're older blokes. We're really comfortable with who we are, and generally, we're all involved in sort of supportive work, etc. But it is nice to have that space.
yeah. It's massive. It's so important. That doesn't need government policy. That
No,
just needs a group of blokes coming together and finding the time to spend time with each other and let the conversation flow.
yeah, and so it's about that empowering, that process of empowering and giving permission. And then, crucially, and I think you're right, we need more mentoring of young men, without a doubt.
Yeah, it's
Without
huge.
calling it that.
Yeah, exactly that. But that's the generation I think we've got to risk. If we don't do something and intervene, we risk losing a really important generation of young men.
Yeah, without a doubt. Because the reality is, if we don't do it, then Andrew Tate will,
Someone else will,
because he'll
exactly.
make the money out of it. That's the truth.
100%.
These grifters, they know, they can smell it. They know
Yeah,
where their bread is buttered and all that sort of
yeah.
stuff.
And my kind of thing is, look, the bad guys have been getting too much of the narrative. It's time for the
Yeah.
good guys to step up and control it back. So that's kind of my call to action.
Right. So, what's your book called again?
It's called Behind the I'm Fine, The Truth About Modern Day Masculinity. It's available on Amazon, Waterstones, wherever you want to get your books from. And yeah, would love your support and any feedback you have, feel free.
Oh, I'm going to read it. But also, do you have a website there? People
Yeah,
can.
it's
What's your
just my
website?
name with a hyphen in the middle. So www.chris-britton.com. And you can find all the information of all the things I work on and how I can potentially help you
And
in
you
your
do public speaking? Can people book you in to do those
exactly.
types of things?
Yeah, public speaking, workshops, all that type of stuff.
Brilliant.
And I'm very happy to help if anyone needs me.
And you're just about to become a dad for the second time. So
I
when that
know.
happens, all bets are off.
All bets are off. Yeah, I'll go quiet for a few months while we figure it out. But I'll be
But
around. Don't worry.
all right, all right. Well, good luck with that. Hope it goes well. Really, my pleasure to see you this morning. You stay there while I say goodbye to people. Folks, I hope that's been sort of inspiring to you in the way it is to me. And I genuinely mean this thing as an old fart bloke. It's so inspiring to see younger guys like Chris. He won't think he's young, but he is comparison to me. Getting on and doing this stuff, the stuff that I've known for years needed to happen. And it's brilliant to see it happen. So thank you very much for the work that you're doing for the next generation, Chris. Hope you all got as much from that as I did. Do get in touch, and I'll see you all at the next show. So goodbye for now.